that going down the track? Who's that going down the track? It's a big old city, run fly. It's a big old city, run fly. Ain't nothing but her in the land. Ain't nothing but her in the land. And a drunk on us is Georgia man. And a drunk on us is Georgia man. No, 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 no.
What's up, y'all? This is John, and Mike is not with me right now. He'll be joining us in just a minute. We are back for another episode of the Nothing Finer podcast, as always on Millions and as a part of the Fans First Sports Network. Just want to remind you guys about the watch party we are having at Barrel House South. Everything we've already talked about. Rock 1061 giving away bar tabs, specials on beer towers, canned cocktails, Orale Tacos doing their whole game day special menu. We're all excited, but we have one of the guys from Nachos and Analysis to talk about the Clemson Tigers for this Aflac Kickoff game. So, if you can hear me, how you doing?
Doing well. How about you?
Doing all right.
Appreciate you having me on.
We appreciate you coming on. We've in the past struggled with finding somebody that's willing to talk to us for ACC opponents.
Well, if it's Clemson, I don't mind.
There you go. We also finally got a recommendation for Georgia Tech. We've been hunting for years.
Oh yeah, who'd you get for Georgia Tech?
We talked to some guys about Virginia Tech, and they recommended Rec Talk.
Okay.
But my whole thing is now y'all are pretty good. Quit avoiding us.
I know y'all weren't, but I was sure pulling for Georgia Tech this past weekend against Florida State. And I'm a Georgia Tech hater. I never find myself pulling for Georgia Tech, but I did last weekend.
I'm gonna be honest with you. We have, since we started the show, 2022 is our first year. We have been begging for Georgia Tech to be at least moderately okay, so the game's worth watching and going to. So most of the Georgia fans I know were pulling for Tech last weekend because that's like, wait, if you guys can do that maybe one or two more times, it'll be a ranked matchup on Black Friday. I'm here for it.
Absolutely. And I mean, we talked about it on our show this week. It's just a matter of time. You get the right coach in there, and you might have the right coach there now with the recruiting hotbed that is Atlanta and the history that Georgia Tech does have. I think it's just a matter of time, and I think the rivalry between Georgia Tech, Clemson is better when both teams are good.
At least the team that's not as good, at least they put up a fight.
Yeah.
I don't want a nail biter, but like put up a fight.
Absolutely.
All right. So, are you ready to get into some Clemson talk?
Let's do it. That's why I'm here.
All right. So, the last few seasons have been relatively disappointing for the standard that Dabo had the program at. What do you think the key factor to that is?
I think it's a variety of things. When Clemson had that lengthy run with back-to-back 10-plus win seasons, back-to-back college football playoff appearances, for any team, and it worked this way for Clemson, the ball has to bounce your way. You have to be fortunate and lucky. And for the most part, during that stretch, Clemson avoided the injuries that at the key positions. The last few years, Clemson has not necessarily been as fortunate, having quite a bit of injuries, especially at the wide receiver position. You miss on a few recruiting, especially at a couple positions, and it's well documented Dabo's lack of transfer portal guys. So when you miss on recruiting and you're not bringing guys in to replace, that's a big part of it too. And then the nation got to see it again this past weekend with DJ. Nothing against the guy. I like him, but he was not a good fit for Clemson with the offense that we were running here and virtually every offensive coordinator that he's had since he's been at Clemson has kind of handled him the same way. It doesn't seem anybody can trust him to throw the ball down the field. But it's been a variety of things for that drop off.
Are you one of the people that believes that DJU still checks under his bed for N'Kobe Dean at night?
He might. He, he might. That might be what ruined him.
Yeah, that's a running joke that I've at least said uh, for years now, and it seems like you get pressure in his face and he forgets he's on a football field.
Absolutely.
So the boys really struggled with keeping with quarterback protection last season. What is their key to keeping Klubnik upright on Saturday? And side note, I've heard it pronounced Klubnik and Klubnik.
I believe it's Klubnik. That's the way
Okay,
I go. I've kind of cringed when I've heard people say Klubnik, but my
it
co-host
it
Matthew.
doesn't sound good.
No. My co-host Matthew gives me grief for mispronouncing DJ's last name all the years that he was at Clemson. So I just refrain from saying his last name at this point. But as far as Cade this year, I think it's a combination of a few things. The improvement of the O-line. Clemson, though their O-line has not been spectacular the last couple of years, they've dealt with some injuries, but as far as combined starts, they're one of the more veteran units in the country. Combine that with, does Cade's decision making improve this year? He has another offseason under his belt, and his wide receivers being able to get separation. A lot of your bigger, more talented receivers dealt with injuries throughout the year last year. So if your receivers are not able to get open, you're panicking trying to make a decision there with pressure coming in your face. That was a lot of Clemson's problems last year with the sacks for Cade Klubnik.
So on a little bit more on the offensive struggles, they struggled with ball security last season, losing 22 turnovers. How are they going to prevent that going into this year?
So I looked up a couple stats in preparation for this. So last year, Clemson was tied nationally at 13th with Ole Miss in total first downs. Clemson was able to move the ball pretty effectively last year between the 20s. But when they got into the red zone is where they had a lot of trouble. Let's see, where were we at? 118th in red zone offense. They were 105th in turnovers, and a lot of those turnovers occurred not only inside the red zone, but a lot of times on the goal line last year. Um, how do you fix turnovers? I don't know. With running backs, you can test the running backs with the drills and running them through the chutes and all that stuff in practice. But as far as interceptions, I think it's just a lot to do with Cade and his decision making and feeling comfortable there in the pocket, especially when he's getting pressure.
So with the Tigers bringing in some young guys at wide receiver, who do you expect to stand out?
Well, all the hype coming out of camp is the freshman Brian Wesco. He's getting all the hype. Everything I've heard has been that he's a freak athlete, and I definitely think that you will see him on the field Saturday against Georgia. Um, but I think what Clemson's going to end up leaning more on this year is that healthy veteran wide receiver room. You don't have necessarily the Sammy Watkins, the T Higgins, those guys, but you have some dudes out there lined up at wide receiver, and with them being healthy, I think that Clemson's going to lean on those guys, and then it's going to allow for younger guys like Brian Wesco to stand out and make a big impact.
So we are firm believers that Clemson has a top five, if not top three, front seven in all of college football. But how do you think they stack up against Georgia's offensive line?
My response to that is there a team in the country that stacks up against Georgia's offensive line? Because everything I hear about Georgia is that offensive line is elite. Um, I'm excited for the matchup on Saturday because it kind of goes strength on strength with Clemson's D line and their front seven in particular. I think that's going to be the key to the game. Um, Clemson has a lot of guys experienced on that front line. They have a lot of talent there. Um, if Georgia can run the ball successfully, against Clemson, it may be a long game for the Tigers. But if the Tigers are able to stop the run and force the passing offense, I think we're in for a good game.
I will say, third year in a row now, I have said this. I am very skeptical about Xavier Truss at tackle. I think he's a much better guard. So that right tackle spot is going to be the weakest spot on the line. Also, the center is coming back from an ankle injury as of last week.
I did read about that this week.
Where are we at? All right. So the secondary seems to be one of the more troubled areas on the team. How much of an impact do those injuries have?
It could be huge. As of now, Shelton Lewis likely out. He had a decent amount of snaps as a true freshman last year. He did get exposed a little bit in the bowl game against Kentucky. But he's definitely a young talent that Clemson will miss more than likely on Saturday. Lucas should be good to go. Freshman Ashton Hampton, as much hype as Wesco's gotten out of camp, Hampton has been getting equally as much hype on the defensive side. I think it's a huge first game to trust a true freshman out there against the number one ranked team in the country. But what's better than trial by fire?
So, what is the area of the game that you are most concerned about?
I know I've mentioned it a couple times, but Cade's mind and his decision making, with going from DJ to Cade, some of the mental errors that DJ had to then kind of seeing some similar stuff with Cade. Can he keep his composure there in the pocket and make the decisions that he needs to make? And then another thing I think on the offensive side of the ball is the wide receiver's ability to block along the perimeter there, because Georgia is known for their physicality there on the outside. When the receiver's not getting the ball, can they hold their block to open up the rest of the offense?
So, digging a little bit into the Cade thing. So months ago, I went back and I watched the spring game for every team Georgia played this season, at least the teams that had spring games, cough cough, Ole Miss and Kentucky, and then obviously like Tennessee Tech and UMass, you can't really find them. But I was a big fan of Trent Pierman. Is that his name?
So was every other Clemson fan in attendance that day.
If Cade Klubnik has a lot of those mistakes in the first half, is there any chance that we see Trent Pierman in the second half?
I do not see that happening. Dabo's pretty committed and loyal to his quarterbacks, and I would be shocked if that would happen.
As a fan of football, I hope he gets to play this year or transfer somewhere where he does play, because that kid was electric.
Yes, and his father is on staff, so the likelihood of him transferring, I don't know. But yeah, it was a point of contention amongst fans on social media after that spring game.
And I will say, Dabo is likable for the spring game. Most of the time, it's iffy. But when you get to see the real person and not just the cringy sound bites,
Oh yeah.
he's so much fun.
Oh, he's full of the sound bites, that's for sure.
So, what's the area of the game that you are most confident in?
I touched on it. Clemson's front seven, they're experienced, they're talented. You got a lot of speed and athleticism there. And then from the scheming and just coaching and preparation, I know Georgia has this experience going back to back with national championships a few years ago, but it seems that Dabo and the staff at Clemson does its best when they have time to prepare for an opponent. You have that time between conference championship time and the first semifinal game, and Clemson's always done extremely well in those playoff spots. Having this entire off season to prepare for this game, I like what Clemson typically does in that spot.
Digging a little bit into the front seven, How much do you expect Sammy Brown to play?
Um, I think that we'll see him quite a bit this year. Um, a talent like that, it's going to find its way on the field. Um, how much we see Saturday, I'm not exactly sure, but I think we'll see him quite a bit in this season.
Of the last recruitings, I would say of the last three, he is the guy I am the most upset Georgia didn't get. That freak.
Yeah,
I think he was built close to the planet that Brock Bowers was built on.
yeah. And um, I got the chance to, I get baseball season tickets for Clemson. He sat out near me a couple of times last season in the spring, and he is a specimen.
Yeah, God, I wish he came to Georgia.
And that was and listening to Kirby Smart's press conference this week, and I know that Georgia's been a big state for Clemson as far as recruiting go, but just the familiarity between these two staffs of the guys, they don't play every year on the field, but they definitely go head to head recruiting every single year.
And there's a lot of coaches on both sides that have coached for both programs, and it's
Absolutely.
I'm very excited for in I guess it's 5 years now the rivalry actually gets back going because what
That's when
there's
the home and home
two.
starts back up.
I believe so. I was looking at it earlier. Um, I'm looking it up now. I will say schedule it. So we got season tickets in 2020, and one of the biggest reasons we did is with Georgia scheduling all these big non-conference opponents that ended up a few of them being conference opponents.
Hmm.
But Clemson was another big one. So 2024, and then 2029, 2030, 2032, 2033.
I like that much better doing the home and home than I mean it's
Yes.
I one of my favorite games, and it was a Clemson loss to Georgia, was just a few years ago, opening up that season in Charlotte. Not necessarily for the outcome of the game, but coming off that COVID year where you were limited in capacity with how many fans could attend. And then we made a whole weekend of it in Charlotte. The night before around Uptown, there was just a buzz in the air. You get in the stadium. It had been a full year since you'd had like a big time college football game, and the energy in Bank of America Stadium that day was awesome. But getting these games back on campus is way more exciting.
I agree. I not a fan of neutral site games in general, and a lot of people, a lot of Georgia fans in my area, because I live in Savannah, a lot of Georgia fans in my area get upset when I say make Georgia Florida home and home. But what's the purpose of having it in Jacksonville at this point?
Yeah, yeah.
I
Money, I guess.
I mean I guess, but and a lot of the economies up and down the Georgia coast boom for that time of year. But at this point, like just for reference, I live on the island next to Tybee. From March until October, you can barely get on the island. So I don't think they need the one weekend's economy boost.
No, and you mentioned that I was down your way last weekend. We were down on Fripp Island, so not too far away in South Carolina.
I got you. I was actually up your way last weekend in Clover.
I graduated from Clover High School.
My my wife's got family in the area, and one of my best friends, he's a football coach for Clover Middle.
Okay,
You ready to pick some games?
let's do it. So we're not going spread, we're just going straight up here.
If you want to, you can give the spread. You can give anything. We try to leave it open ended. Um, but I didn't even ask this. Is there anything else about the game that you want to talk about?
As much as I've read about it, as much as I've talked about it between you and our podcast, I'm just ready for college football to be back. I have the NC State Western Carolina game over here on my TV, ordered some chicken wings, and I'm just I love college football, and I'm just excited for it to be back. Looking forward to being in Mercedes-Benz Stadium this weekend, and should be fun.
We almost went to the game. One of our routine guests has he gets boxes for all the games, and we'd set up the watch party like you heard me talking about downtown Savannah with a bar. And then like a week later, he texted me and he's like, "Hey man, you want tickets?" I'm like, "Wish I'd have got this text a week ago."
Yeah.
Um, yeah, let's pick some games. So you already mentioned it. You can pick however you want to, but first game, Penn State at West Virginia. Penn State is in the line's probably changed since I wrote this down. 8.5 point favorite with the over under at 51.5.
I'm gonna go with Pitt straight up. We touched on this on our show this week. Um, Penn State, did I say Pitt? I'm in Penn State there. Penn State is one of those teams that always tends to get a lot of hype, but can't seem to find a way to win the big one. I think they're going to be one of the biggest beneficiaries of the 12-team playoff this year, but I think they beat West Virginia outright.
We um we do our own poll every week, and my rule of thumb with Penn State is rank them at 15 until they give you a reason to move them.
That's very wise of you.
Next game, Notre Dame at Texas A&M. A&M 2.5 point favorite, over under 46.5.
I don't know how popular of a pick this is. I threw this out as my underdog pick on our show this week, but I think Notre Dame covers and wins this outright on the road.
I wish neither team could win this game.
I tend to agree with you there.
Um, Sunday night game, Southern Cal versus LSU. LSU 4.5 point favorite, over under 63.5.
I'm going to take LSU in this one.
And then last but not least, Clemson versus Georgia, that 12 o'clock on Saturday game. Georgia 13.5 point favorite, over under 49.5.
So that line has come down a little bit. I think at one point it was as high as 14 and a half. Um, I I've seen projections all over the place with this game. Most people not giving Clemson a chance at all. Um, I tend to think that it being the first game of the season, we might see something similar to that matchup in 2021. I definitely think we'll see an offensive touchdown this time, but I think it'll be a defensive battle. I don't think Clemson wins, but I do think Clemson covers the spread. But I think the Georgia Bulldogs keep that trend alive that I think dates back to 1990 preseason #1 winning opening weekend.
Well, we appreciate having you on, and I'm glad that you, as a Clemson fan, have confirmed that I am safe. I made a T-shirt bet with one of the guys I play disc golf with, and if Clemson wins, I have to wear a Clemson T-shirt for the next month anytime we see each other.
I lost a similar bet. We do a season long pick 'em contest on our show, and 2 years ago I lost. I had to wear it was at the time Spurs Up, now SEC Unfiltered, but he had a Clem Sucks Carolina shirt, and I had to wear that to the Clemson Carolina baseball game that year as my punishment. So I know the pain of that.
Yes, Chris Phillips is actually how we got in touch with you guys.
Okay, Chris is a good dude.
One of our favorite guests, and honestly, the worst part about the new SEC schedule is that Georgia doesn't play South Carolina every year, so now we got to find a reason to get him on and talk.
When was the last time that Georgia South Carolina did not play each other? It has to have been a long time, or was it like one of those weird COVID things where they didn't happen to play that year?
Um, hmm, I'll have to look that up because it's been a long time because I've been to a lot of these games recently. So they did play in 2020. Um,
You might be scrolling for a while because I feel like it's been a long time.
So when South Carolina moved to the SEC, and it was 92, correct?
That sounds about right.
Yeah, they've played every year since 92. And before
Okay.
that, they played every year from I'm already in the 50s, and they played every year until 89 and then took a break until 92.
That's kind of like Clemson and Georgia Tech. We play every year, got that rivalry going, but Georgia Tech is not on Clemson's schedule this year.
The rivalries is the worst thing about the new expansion and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But hopefully that just makes the rivalries mean more when they do get to play again.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking conference realignment, all these new matchups are going to happen. Oregon and Washington being in the Big Ten, Texas, Oklahoma being in the SEC. Me personally, I'm not too excited about Cal, Stanford in the ACC, but I do think SMU will eventually be a nice fit. Um, so yeah, it does suck losing some of these
BYU and
rivalries,
Utah
but
playing Big 12 games.
yeah.
That'll that'll be a good one. No, I'm really excited. I know you're really excited. Is there anything you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
Just check out. I know your demographic is probably pretty much all Georgia, but if
If
you
you're
care to
willing to
follow
talk to
along with
people
Clemson,
like Chris Phillips, then you have a bunch of people on, and that's what we do as well.
oh yeah, we're probably most active on Twitter at Nachos_analysis, and a lot of college football coverage, a lot of college baseball coverage. We got a weekly podcast, the college football show that comes out every Thursday, previewing pretty much Clemson stuff, but we talk just general college football as well.
Awesome. We appreciate you coming on. And I got to close some things out here at the end, but have a good night. And I hope you have a lot of fun the rest of the season, but not this weekend.
Same to you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. All right. So Mike will be coming on for the next episode. Buried the lead here. We're recording two episodes, breaking the preview down into two. They are going to come out back to back this week, but in the future, one will come out on Thursday, one will come out on Friday. We're going to have the interview come out on Thursday. And man, we're excited for the football season. I know you guys are too. And last but not least, we do have the Calling the Dogs line back open. So the number is, if my computer will work long enough to pull it up. Here we go. It is 912. And everything's lagging again. Hold on, guys. I'm not used to doing this by myself. So we got 912-514-0707. That is the Calling the Dogs number this year. In the next episode, we have one coming up, so don't forget to call in if you want to join in on the fun for that. But as always, guys, remember there's nothing finer in the land than a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.